The Sky Isn't the Limit: Adverse Effects of Punitive Punishment by Caleb Washington and Melissa Keplinger. What is punitive punishment? Punitive punishment encompasses disciplinary measures that prioritize punishment over rehabilitation in schools, often leading to excessive suspensions or expulsions, especially for minority students. This approach stifles educational opportunities, pushing students towards higher dropout rates, increased alienation from school environment, a higher likelihood of future misconduct, and a lack of engagement in learning. Instead of fostering a supportive and constructive atmosphere, punitive measures may inadvertently reinforce the cycle of misbehavior and disengagement. Educators are increasingly encouraged to adopt restorative practices that prioritize understanding, dialogue, and personal growth over punishment, aiming to create a more inclusive and positive educational experience. Where we see higher levels of punitive punishment are in urban schools. Urban schools face significant challenges, including underfunding, high student to teacher ratios, and lacking resources, which exacerbate the issues of punitive discipline. These systemic failures contribute to an atmosphere of insecurity and peril, where punitive measures become commonplace responses to behavioral issues. Black students are significantly affected by punitive measures, facing disproportionate suspension rates that impede their educational success. These punitive actions not only disrupt their learning, but also contribute to long term repercussions, including increased chances of incarceration. The real problem lies deep in our history, where historically, people of color have been persecuted and purposely restricted from opportunity. Attitudes towards Black people have largely been negative, and this bias festers in our classrooms, policies, and institutions. All the while, societies ignore the trauma of history on Black youth and punish them for being products of injustice. Combating racism has been a long and continuous fight that is the root of the disparities we see today. Socioeconomic factors can significantly influence negative behavior in Black students, often entwining with systemic issues and historical contexts. Students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds may experience higher levels of stress due to financial instability, food insecurity, and limited access to resources. These stressors can manifest as frustration, anxiety, or disengagement in the classroom. Black students are walking into classrooms every day with their trauma, and it isn't being seen for what it is. Statistics reveal that Black students are suspended at disproportionately higher rates compared to their peers. Nationally, Black students face suspension rates exceeding 15%, highlighting systemic bias and failure in educational environments meant to uplift. Contributing to some of the negative and aggressive behaviors we see is that students in urban schools navigate an unspoken code of violence, where survival often involves adhering to brutal social norms. This code forces students to adopt aggressive behaviors to avoid victimization, making schools feel more like battlegrounds than learning environments. The psychological toll of punitive discipline is profound. Students face anxiety, depression, and a diminished sense of self worth. These effects not only hinder academic performance, but also affect long term mental health outcomes for marginalized youth. Zero tolerance policies in schools are designed to maintain order but disproportionately affect Black students. These policies often lead to suspensions and expulsions for minor infractions, exacerbating the cycle of failure and criminalization. Additionally, the implementation of zero tolerance policies often lacks consideration for the individual circumstances surrounding a student's behavior, leading to perceptions of unfair treatment and discrimination. This can exacerbate feelings of mistrust towards the school system, hinder positive relationships between students and educators, and limit opportunities for restorative practices that could address the root causes of behavioral issues. Overall, the rigid nature of zero tolerance policies can have detrimental long term effects on the academic and social development of Black students. Teachers face unique challenges as they navigate increasingly violent environments, often feeling trapped between their commitment to students and their own safety. This tension impacts their ability to provide support and mentorship to students in need. Bias and simply not knowing how to address the multitude of issues Black students face impede educators' abilities to effectively teach students of color and nurture them in academic environments. The school to prison pipeline reflects a system where punitive discipline directly contributes to youth incarceration. This cycle is fueled by zero tolerance policies that criminalize minor infractions, pushing marginalized students out of educational institutions and into the justice system. Factors contributing to this pipeline include systemic racism, implicit biases in disciplinary practices, and inadequate support systems in schools. Black students are disproportionately subjected to suspensions, expulsions, and arrests for behaviors that may be overlooked in their peers. As a result, many Black students experience academic disengagement, increased dropout rates, and a heightened risk of incarceration, perpetuating a cycle of disadvantage and marginalization. Addressing this issue requires comprehensive reforms in school discipline, cultural competency for training for teachers, and the implementation of restorative justice practices that prioritize understanding and support over punishment. New approaches to school discipline should focus on restorative practices that emphasize healing and community. By creating supportive environments, schools can reduce suspensions and foster a culture of trust and respect among students and staff. Restorative practices can significantly benefit Black students by fostering a supportive and inclusive school environment that prioritizes understanding and healing over punishment. By promoting open dialogue among students, educators, and families, these practices build trust and a sense of belonging. They also focus on understanding the root causes of behaviors, allowing for targeted support that addresses issues such as trauma and socioeconomic challenges. Furthermore, restorative practices empower students by involving them in the resolution process, encouraging accountability and personal growth. This approach helps reduce the disproportionate disciplinary measures often faced by Black students, creating a more equitable educational experience that cultivates positive behavior and academic success. Overall, restorative actions contribute to a school climate that values community, respect, and healing. Through restorative justice, Black students can be cultured and nurtured, and so that they too can reach beyond the stars.
Now, as good as that presentation may have been from Ms. Keplinger, I want to visit the issues of disproportionate discipline in sports, scholastic competitions. So I sat down with a few coaches and athletes to get their take on things.
Distribution of the discipline, because a lot of the times you'll see the white students, they'll get a little pep talk or pulled aside, taken out of the classroom. I'm not going to say that they are coddled. I would definitely say that that faculty tries to avoid. I would say accountability if need be in certain situations. A lot of accountability isn't dished out. There's a lot of enabling, especially in athletics. There's a lot of enabling because a lot of people don't like to admit that there's politics that go about athletics. So you have playing time, other things, other minute things that get paid attention to as far as like behavior. So like mannerisms on the field, the aggression, the professionalism, and all that type of stuff are the things that are paid attention to more in the minority than it is with the white kids or the white players. And you'll also see passion be cloaked as arrogance or moxie, which is not bad when it comes to sports. However, when it comes to like the media and the portrayal of that this guy may be a little in over his head, or he's too cocky, he's too full of himself, when in reality, guys are just confident in what they do and the things that they work for and toward to produce the product that they put out. Even in the classroom too, you'll have a lot of black students who are passionate about what they do, and they kind of go about it the same way athletes would when it comes to putting in the time and the effort to get things done. So you'll see certain behaviors and certain actions that kind of have to be done, or a black student may have to go out of their way a little more, come to more office hours, or go see their teacher at the classrooms or at the tests more so, compared to some teachers or staff that will go out of their way for the white students. Instead of the student coming to them and asking them questions, they'll go out of their way and help them out. So when it comes to at least the discipline in this sense, I would say that the disproportion comes from kind of whoever is in charge, at least at whatever institution or program or organization that is being ran, as far as the discipline being handed out goes. The reason that this is relevant is because obviously that the equity in education, quality is okay, but equity means more because everybody gets the relevant help that they would need, or the resources that they would need, not necessarily just to have a handout. So with the discipline, it has to be both sides. It has to be, because if not, then you'll have a lot of students you'll be enabling a lot of behavior from in schools and on the field, and that can be detrimental to the way a school or an organization functions. Then the most important relevancy about it, in my opinion, is that it can lead to distrust in authority. So as these students develop over time, as they get older, their trust with authority will start to diminish because they will have to tend to themselves rather than going to reach out for help from even parents, let alone faculty and staff.
So I think the main thing that sports helps students with in school, in regards to discipline, is like emotional regulation. Teaching these kids not to just act off impulse, because a lot of times in sports, if you act off impulse, you mess up, and there's just a lot of good reps of them doing it in the sport, and it's going to translate directly in the classroom. So if somebody pokes at them too much, instead of just reacting, maybe hitting them where you get in trouble, they'll ask them, can you stop first? Then they'll have other actions, go to the teacher, you know what I'm saying? Same way you would go to your coach, right? You just want to, basically, I think the main thing would be emotional control and, learning to be stoic, learning not to just be so impulsive, right? So
I'd say the best way is group discipline. I think if one player or student messes up, I think everybody should have to get disciplined. And I feel like that motivates the player because they don't feel singled out. You know, if you have your whole team behind you, all your peers, students, everyone kind of pulling their same weight for your mess up, it motivates you to, because it's easy to get caught up in not liking a coach, not liking a teacher, but you feel a lot more pressure from your peers. So if you got your peers suffering with you, you know, I feel like it gives you that extra motivation to kind of handle your job and everyone else handles their job and come together for the greater good.
In the meantime, let's return back to the school to prison pipeline and how black students are disproportionately disciplined.
And the whole thing with schools, it's supposed to be a safe space to learn and to grow. And for black students, it's not like, it doesn't feel safe. It feels like another challenge we have to overcome. Getting up every day, like getting on the bus and ignoring what people say. And then you go to class and you need to ignore what the teacher says, but you also need to like take in the important stuff for class. And you need to go to lunch and ignore all the slurs you hear in the hallway, as you said. And it's so taxing emotionally. And at one point, like, it doesn't even feel like an extra weight because you're so used to experiencing it in a way that you don't know that it's supposed to be any different. And I don't really want that for like people like my sisters. I don't want them to have to go through that. I don't want them to get used to this.
Rehabilitation through the prison system isn't working. In 2012, the Department of Justice began tracking formerly incarcerated people of all ages. The latest report, released in July, found that of individuals arrested at age 17 or younger, 71% had been rearrested within 3 years of their release. That number climbed to 80% by year 5. The impact on an adolescent's access to education is part of the issue. In 2015, the Council of State Governments found 1 in 3 incarcerated youth were either receiving or needed special education services. The report also found more than half of incarcerated youth were behind grade level in reading and math, and around 60% had repeated a grade. The educational obstacles after prison begin before the first arrest, says Hinger, when school disciplinarians initially put a child in contact with the justice system.
The school to prison pipeline refers to the process whereby school systems address young people through discipline and criminalization and effectively place them on a pipeline to continuing and more extensive contact with the justice system.
And that can cause long-term harm.
It ends up undermining any sort of positive modeling or reinforcement. It further removes the child's attachment to school, alienating them and pushing them forward towards more negative influences.
And even if an adolescent is innocent when arrested, the length of time required to post bail could lead to still incarcerates the most children in the world. Sarah Hinger is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU's Racial Justice 20 years. But the United States still incarcerates the most children in the world. Sarah Hinger is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU's Racial Justice Program.
The United States far outpaces other countries in detaining and otherwise criminalizing young people. And that has, again, similar to the adult system, a disparate impact on youth of color who are disproportionately represented in contact with the criminal justice system.
But why is that? And why are so many youths arrested in the first place? Michael Corriero is a former New York State Supreme Court justice.
At the turn of the 19th century, we created the world's first juvenile justice system. The idea behind that was that as a society, we had a moral obligation to recognize the developmental differences of children as compared to adults.
But the idea
In
of
the 1970s, they started requiring schools to report how many students they classified as disabled, plus suspensions and expulsions, all broken down by race and gender. Over the next few decades, those numbers went up as more punitive ideas about discipline took hold in American schools. Well, in some schools.
Gangs and drugs have taken over our streets and undermined our schools.
The idea that if you don't, throw the book at kids when they're young for every little thing, that they're going to turn into criminals. There's never any research to show that it actually worked. You never see that in schools serving mostly white
They gave
kids.
students tickets for offenses like disrupting class or using profanity. Black students were 4 times more likely than white students to receive those tickets. Nationwide, Black boys miss way more school due to suspensions than any other group. And this can start a kind of chain reaction. Missing weeks of school due to suspensions makes students much more likely to drop out. Without a diploma, you're much less likely to earn a living wage and much more likely to be incarcerated. All this missing school is helping to drive the highest poverty and incarceration rates in the developed world. Of 2019, a 6-year-old student named Kaya was sitting in her school's office.
Okay, she's gonna have to come with us now.
That's a police officer. This video comes from his body camera. At first, it seems like Kaya doesn't know what's happening.
No, I want to come Holy! Oh, I was in school. I just saw you.
Earlier that day, Kaya had a tantrum. 3 school employees said that she had kicked them. The school called the police, who arrested Kaya on charges of misdemeanor battery.
I don't want to go to the police car.
The police dropped the charges after Kaya's grandmother sent this video to the Orlando Sentinel. Kaya's case isn't an isolated incident.
A 5-year-old girl being handcuffed by police in Florida.
For a year, he could not sleep alone.
He put handcuffs on me.
Tossed to the ground by a school resource officer.
What you're seeing are the effects of a larger problem in American schools. The U.S. doesn't treat all students equally. But if we wanted to, we could do something about that.
So we must ask ourselves, when will enough be enough? At some point, we must stop trying to remove, and we have to start trying to resolve.